So, welcome everyone to Carving a New Path. My name is Andrea Hylen, and I am the host of this show. And just to tell you a few quick things, the podcast began in 2020 in response to all the change that people were experiencing. And so the conversations and the guests on this podcast have, I was going to say at some point, but let's just say many times, listened to their inner voice and birthed new ways of being in the world. And so that kind of beginning is continuing. And today's show is episode 26. And it's actually today is the beginning of monthly conversations that Karen Porter and I are going to have in 2024 about conscious self evolution. And today we're going to focus on a question that I wrote in a recent blog post. The question is, are you an evolutionary woman? And I feel like before we get started on that conversation, I want to say hello to you, Karen Porter, and have you introduce yourself to the audience.
All right. That is, I'm not sure where to begin. There, I feel like I've lived many different lives within my life
Mhm.
and wonder how many more there are to come. Um, Born in Baltimore, uh, adopted two wonderful boys from Russia when Russia first opened. It was the Soviet Union then. Um, Really crazy kind of background, close-knit family, very, very hardworking, child labor involved, trigger warning.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Oh, throw in some sexual abuse by an in-law and the subsequent ramifications of that. Um, Not being listened to by the medical community basically my whole life. Have some genetic issues. Um, and through it all, uh, had a store, um, did crisis intervention work, um, did adoption, post-institutional education for those adopting kids coming out of institutions, um, did relief work for the orphanages, uh, homeschooled the boys, got them on their way, and then there's the whole wifey thing that happens. So that's kind of where I am now, in the wifey supportive part. Because I was there for when my parents transitioned and had varying degrees of kind of downhill um, happenings in their lives and diseases of different types and support. Um, my mother, then my father, my aunt, then sister-in-law. Um, in passing, the sister-in-law was very young. She had leukemia, was diagnosed and died within about 9 months. Um, and at that point, David said, I'm not putting off anything. If we can afford to retire early, we are. And he could, and we could. And I said, well, I've done my work here. Um, do you want to move to Seattle so you can have time with your folks before they pass? So we've been out here seven, 7 years? I think 7 years.
Mhm.
Or 8 years. I don't know. 2016 we moved. And so he's had some really good time, and now we're into that they're starting to pass phase and dealing with loss and grief in another family. My own sister is dealing with the effects of a pretty severe stroke. So moving into different ways of support for different people. And in addition to seeing to my own voyage in this crazy ship called life, I don't know.
Mhm.
So anyhow, I write, I'm an artist. Um, I knit, was knitter of the year
You
for
were
for knitters.
2007, is it?
Yeah, 2007, right. Um, Knitters magazine named me knitter of the year, and that was because I incorporated knitting in the relief work and supported knitting programs in the orphanages, and then delivered knit stuff that people sent me to the orphanages. And yeah, so there's other stuff. Who cares?
Well, it's great. And I know, and I want to just say to the listeners that part of, something to understand that we're going to have this conversation every month about conscious self-evolution. And what Karen was just demonstrating was self-evolution. And we are, I was going to say, we're always evolving, whether we want to or not. And part of this conversation is about consciousness.
Right.
Because, one thing, and again, I feel like everything that you brought up, Karen, we're going to kind of unpack over the next year and go deeper into these stories, because within the stories, there is adoption, there are health things that happen, there is moving, there's family, there's grief, and these choices that we make along the way, and hopefully to become even more conscious about where we have control over our decisions, our choices, that you don't necessarily have a choice if you have a chronic condition that comes up that's passed along throughout the family genes, but you have choices on how you're going to
Mhm.
navigate that, how you're going to, so there's, different things like that. So for the listeners, I want to just give you a little bit of context here. So what is an evolutionary woman? This comes from Barbara Marx Hubbard's 52 Codes for Conscious Self-Evolution, where she defined it as a feminine co-creator, one who is incarnating the creative intention of universe, localized within herself as her own passion to create, one who is consciously self-evolving and is willing to realize her full potential for the good of the self and the whole human community. She also defined self-evolution as, while self-development works toward improvement, self-evolution offers a new template. It is open-ended. We have not yet seen the full model of what we can become. And something I want to put into the something that I wrote about in the blog post, I'm just going to mention briefly, is that and actually, if you go to my website, andreahylen.com, you'll see that that blog post is the last one, because I just put it in there to have it updated for the podcast. But when I went to my first Evolutionary Women retreat, I was listening to the women telling stories, and it became clear that there were two things that had occurred multiple times for each woman. One was a breakdown. Something was missing or no longer working, and societal norms did not provide any solutions. And the second thing was a breakthrough, that
Mhm.
what came out of that breakdown were new ideas, synchronicity, and solutions seemed to pop up out of nowhere with action steps that required faith, risk, innovation, and creativity. And most of the time, it required finding a new support system, resources, and community. So I'll just, with that as the context, are you an evolutionary woman, Karen?
Hmm.
Would you define
Yeah,
yourself in that way? Yeah.
yeah, I think I was born an evolutionary person,
Mhm.
and grew into womanhood and, evolutionarily. But I can remember as a child, it's like, don't they see? Don't they understand? Um, and being just aware of, okay, it's probably going to take some time for them to catch up, but they always did. Um, so I was in trouble a lot
Mhm.
of the time. I was a troublemaker. I was a rabble rouser. I was, questioning authority all the time. And yes, evolutionary. Though I think the one um through line that I could see in my life that I've talked about a couple times was just jumping in and doing what needed to be done. Um, Seeing a need and then filling the need. Um, uh, it kind of jumping forward into like adult life. When I had the store, there was building the community of the Federal Hill in Baltimore, creating a business map, gathering people and doing that so that, we could, have something to hand somebody who comes to one place so they know about other places. Um, when I was working with the crisis center, there were different support groups that had not happened before, like the parents group for children who had been abused. Um, and hopping in there and creating that. Um, Seeing the needs in the orphanages, creating children in common to give relief, offer relief and support for those kids. Um, Seeing the need for parent education
Mhm.
when we're adopting and these little alien creatures started coming into our lives, and connecting with other adoptive communities and realizing there was such thing as post-institutionalization, and looking back to research after or during and after the world wars when there were orphanages and
Mhm.
what effect it had on kids and how to support kids to learn how to be a member of a family rather than I was going to say an inmate, um, or a member of the population of an institution. Um, so as things present themselves, I said, well, sure, it would be easy enough to start dealing with that and putting a structure in place to fill the need.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so yes, I am an evolutionary woman. Um, the thing that really has guided me and is what Barbara calls the resonant field.
Mhm. Yeah, talk
Um,
about that.
yeah, the resonant field is when you consciously and at first you're unconsciously drawn
Sure.
to the And it's like-minded, like-valued people coming together for a purpose, and it could be a stitch and bitch group.
Mhm.
It could be a book group. It could be, any kind of, used to be like coffee clatch.
Mhm.
But it's support, and it's when you join in, um, in the Bible, it's when two or more gather. You create something bigger than the sum of the components. And you basically create a field of resonance, um, within which you can feel accepted and relaxed. And it's almost like the collective gives you permission to be yourself
Mhm.
and bring forth things to the world, to your life, um, that in other areas you wouldn't feel supported in doing.
Mhm.
So I don't know, Andrea,
Yeah,
what's your
yeah, no, that I think that's really, really good and important, and so many layers in there. I mean, the thing I was thinking about as you were speaking was how when I first heard about evolutionary women, and pardon me, for any of the men who are listening or anyone who identifies as another gender, I started with it being called Are You an Evolutionary Woman? Because that was the retreats. The retreats were for they were evolutionary women retreats. And this requires all humans to be evolving. So, conscious self-evolution is for every living, I'll say, thing, because it's humans, trees, the ocean, it's all of nature. We are part of nature. But when I first heard about it, it was the weekend of the memorial service of my husband, and I got a postcard in the mail from Lucky Sweeny and Bonnie Kelley. And Lucky was a friend I'd had for a long time who had moved from Maryland to Santa Barbara, California, and it was going to be the first Evolutionary Women Retreat. And I remember looking at it like, I want to be an evolutionary woman, and I was 48 years old at the time. And so I signed up and went there. It was like 4 months later. And I had been listening to the teachings of Barbara Marx Hubbard because I knew she was going to be a speaker at the first retreat. So I went there, and in the first activity of the first evening, they had us get into groups of three. And it was that there was to be a speaker, a witness, and a listener. So the speaker person in this group of three would speak to one person who was the listener, and the other third person in the group would witness it. I cannot even tell you the question they asked us. But they asked a question, and I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to say, but I'll go first. Sure. Nobody else wanted to go first. And they had us close our eyes and think about the question. And all of a sudden, I had a flash of my whole life go through. And I realized I am an evolutionary woman. And just as you said, where you described seeing a need and filling the need, or as a child looking around and going, why are people acting this way? Or, I mean, I know one of mine was, why is my mom saying she's fine when it feels like she's really sad? And so it's like feeling things that were going on in the household that people didn't uh, address or admit to, and also wondering why humans act the way they act. And then as I get older, having the power to make different choices and decisions. So I think part of it is, and as much as we joke around about like a stitch and bitch group, it's like part of it actually is that we're not sitting in the complaint of what's happening. We're actually saying something has broken down what would be the solution to this? And I know that when my children were in elementary school, I was just really looking at the system and trying to like jump in and volunteer and find ways to contribute to the education of my children. And I kept asking questions about why they were doing things the way they were doing, or why the bully in the school wasn't getting some support, or you know what I mean? Not just the kids who, not just the punishment, but why is the person bullying? Like, could we look at what's going on there? So it's like I was always asking these questions, and there came a point where I just didn't see a way to change the whole system. So I decided to homeschool. And that's actually how we met. We were in
Right.
a homeschooling community that, to me, it was community-based learning. It was connecting with families and people sharing their talents and skills when the kids were younger. And then maybe finding the person who wants to teach some science or math or organize a softball game or teach art, and we came together in different things. We tried different things. We had a cooperative at one point. Um, yeah. So we found different things. And there was a point where we could come together and talk about things that weren't working and see if anyone had different ideas for that. So, yeah. So I'm just saying, um, Stitch and Bitch has a place because sometimes you just need an outlet, a place
Right,
to
right,
say
right.
it all. And I feel like part of conscious self-evolution is actually addressing what we're bitching about, where we're down at, and to see if there's a new idea for how to do that. And I've continued to be someone who looks at, well, if I want to do this, but I can't do it this way, is there another way that I can do it? Or is there something else for me to be focusing my attention on, and whether it's creating organizations or structure or, yeah, I mean, decades ago, I would call people together, called some men and women to come over and let's study John Bradshaw's The Family and look at the dysfunction that we grew up in, and is there a way for us to stop, not pass that on to the next generation, or how do we heal and forgive that? And so there's all kinds of ways that you can do it. To me, one of the places is to look at um, what's going on in your life, where are the breakdowns that are happening, and gathering with some people, get some support, or follow your own instincts about what to yeah, steps to take to make a change in your life. Create a new template, as Barbara is talking about. She's saying that it's not just about like self-development. That's great. It works towards improvement. But self-evolution is actually creating a new template for what it looks like, a new template for whatever you're drawn to, education systems, political systems, government systems, financial, and on and on and on. And then recognizing what is your part right now. Yeah. So that's some of what comes to me about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, what else? Anything else that you want to share for this first?
Yeah, well, a thought just came, or yeah, it's been bubbling for a while.
Uh-huh.
Um, for me, it's been a piece of cake, really easy to put systems in place for others.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you talked about the homeschooling. When the boys came out of an environment where there was very little stimulation, that led to very little brain activity and development, and they were very delayed. Yet, you knew that I knew they weren't limited or stupid, even though they had the archaic labels of imbecile. I don't know if they both were imbeciles, but one of them was at least.
Hmm.
Anyhow, that those old designations from the Soviet system. And oh, I'll share before I forget. Soviet medicine has a specialty called defectology.
Interesting. Defectology. Okay.
Defectology. So guess what that person finds? They find the defects.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, you find what you're looking for. Um, but when the boys came home, Sasha was 2 when he came home, or he just turned 2 after he got home. But he wasn't really verbal. And uh, Anton hadn't had a childhood really. And he saw that babies got the attention. So yeah, it's better to be a baby than a kid.
Mm.
So we tried the school system, and they had a gift from God in a preschool teacher, Miss Rainey. And then after that, reality kind of set in, and I realized if these kids weren't going to be scarred and labeled, um, they needed to not be in that system.
Mhm.
So, I homeschooled, and we pretended to do work pages, to placate the father figure. And, basically I just let them play,
Mhm.
all day, every day. And, we did field trips and this and that. And when enough um, stimulation had happened and enough, pathways were created and in their heads, then things clicked into place. But
Mhm.
both were very late readers. Anton did not read until he was 12. Sasha, I think, was about 9 when he was able to start reading. But before that, they listened to books on tape.
Mhm.
They got read to. They made it. They wrote their own stories.
Mhm.
We had adventures in Legoland. When their grandparents were in China, the basement was the site for the Great Wall of China in Legos.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, so and you know, they're now IT guys, and Sasha works for a library system and has a degree in accounting, and you know they they're functional adults,
Mhm.
um, but they had very um, alternative early learning situations. Um, but circling back to the putting structures in place for other people, um, that's been that's been easy. Um, Now I'm really, it seems like the work is me right now, and putting structures in place and creating that template for me that is not focused on the other, but focused on myself is where I'm challenged.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's part of evolving, is
Oh,
looking at
mhm.
where is the next thing. I thought it was interesting also that you called it alternative education. And yet, yes, it was alternative then. And it's actually a way of, like, what if we had created environments for children that when they enter school, that a big part of it is focused on play with and playing with each other, playing with materials that are there. And I mean, I know there are some progressive schools that have that, and that in that play, the teacher's role is to actually observe what the children are drawn to. What are their natural interests? Because I remember in the homeschool community, one of the boys was really into sports. He loved sports. Everything was sports. And I learned from his mother that every subject they found a way to, so it was like find books about people who played sports and, learn about the story of that person, write a story about someone who plays a sport. And that through that, that was an entry into all kinds of learning. What is the science? What is the math around sports? And that you're actually engaging the children in things that they're interested in, which is how adults continue to learn also, or drawn to things that we're interested in. And then in that, it expands to all learning, all different types of things to learn about. Um, and so what's considered alternative, it's like, what if that actually is a better way for children to learn and to become fully functioning adults?
Mhm.
And then I appreciate also your reflection on what's the growth edge for you? And for right now, it's focusing on yourself.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
your own conscious self evolution. So I look forward to seeing over the next year how that growth edge for you continues to expand. And
Mhm.
I would say also, I'm at a point where, um, so like in the incubator, something that I offer once a year for women, an online co-working space for women creatives, that the topic I'm writing about this time is flip the script. And so I'm looking at all areas of my life, what's working, what isn't working, what is actually calling out to me to evolve, and being in that open space of listening. And you and I will talk about some of the 52 codes every
Mhm.
month. And so I don't have it at my fingertips for what we're going to focus on next time, but that will come. And yeah, so we'll begin there. And I look forward to using this space with you, Karen, to really look at how the codes are speaking to
Oh,
us.
yeah. Mhm.
Because conscious self-evolution it's not a linear process. It is a more of a right, a spiral, the spiral. So yeah, to see how that, and where's the forward movement and where's the standing still and where's the couple steps back. Yeah, sometimes taking a couple steps back gives us a running start and then the leap
Right.
counts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would encourage everyone who's listening to this to just look at to reflect on a breakdown that's either happened in the past or that is happening now, some kind of breakdown in your life. And it doesn't have to be like a building blowing up. It could be like realizing that you need to change a window, in the house. So reflect on that and then see if what synchronicities start to appear with solutions that you haven't seen as of yet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I may, I would invite listeners to reflect and identify um, situations or groups that have served you as resonant fields.
I love that.
And, I think that the pandemic kind of knocked everybody off their pins. And it's just now, within the past, month or two, that it feels like we're starting to come together and create those circles again, those groups again. And online has been great. And so maybe for some people, the online will be the primary source of support. Um, and maybe there's a bit of a void. And so something new will come and to fill that need.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I feel like let's end with that,
Okay.
Karen. And just to let everyone know that the questions and some of the things that we talked about today are listed in the show description. And I would love to hear from you. So there's places to comment. And I'd love to know what's breaking down and what's breaking through in your life, and what resonant fields are you finding or that you want to find. So
Mhm.
please share in the comments, and if you subscribe, you will to wherever you're listening to this on either YouTube, iTunes, or Spotify, then you'll get announcements when we do our next one in January.
We're on all those platforms.
Yes, ma'am. I do
Well,
not
that's multi
fool around.
that's multidimensional in itself.
And that it is, that it is. And we'll put it out on different social media also. So
Excellent.
let's expand the conversation. Yeah,
Oh,
more that you and I are speaking here, and we'd love to hear from others about what's going on in your lives too.
wonderful.
All right. Do you feel complete?
Absolutely. So till
Oh,
next time.
all right. Thanks for being here, Karen. And thanks to everyone for listening and in asking your own questions about your own conscious self-evolution. So, all right. Bye-bye now.